let's go into the second segment where we talk about Doc Rivers being selected as the head coach for the Eastern Allstars. So, with the All-Star lineups being announced, obviously the coaches are going to follow suit eventually, and they're going to be announced eventually. Doc Rivers, who only coached 4 games up to this point, and just won only once in a comeback against Dallas, has been named the Eastern All-Stars head coach. Doc Rivers, once he found out about the news, quoted saying, "This is ridiculously bad." Yes, this is Doc himself saying this. He can't even believe he was chosen for the position. So, obviously, we all know that the Bucks fired their former head coach, Adrian Griffin. He went 30-12 through the season. So, why did he get fired? What's the reason? Why did he get fired? Was it the offense? Was it the defense? Their defensive rating has definitely tanked this year compared to previous years. But that's what happens when you have someone like Damian Lillard on the roster. Now, obviously, Dame, great basketball player, great on the offense, but he's a terrible defender. I've said this once, and I'll say it again, said it many times on this podcast. It's one of the many overlooked reasons as to why Portland hasn't been able to make a deep playoff run outside of 2019. And with the Bucks, it's actually even worse. The Bucks are really, really bad at defending the pick and roll. Brook Lopez plays really low on the screen, and in an era right now where a bunch of teams are taking a bunch of three-pointers, that is not ideal because the teams can easily come off the screen and then immediately shoot the dribble pull-up since Brook Lopez is playing so down low on the screen. It's a shot that Dame actually hits, and it's one of his signature shots that I've seen him hit all the time. Now the rest of the league is doing it on him. This is a problem because when the Bucks didn't have Dame, it's just his defense is that it's much worse. Like, this wasn't a problem when they didn't have Dame because Drew Holiday was a pretty competent defender. His IQ on the defensive side of the ball is definitely much greater than Dame's IQ on the defensive side of the ball. And it wasn't that much worse because they were able to recover a lot quicker. Damian Lillard, with his size and with how big the screens are on him, it's very difficult for him to recover through that screen, thus giving open looks almost every single time. They allow so many open looks because of this. It's unreal. And with the amount of open looks that they allow, it makes sense how they end up losing a lot of these games in a lot of comeback wins from the other team. Just like how it happened last night where the Bucks lost to the Utah Jazz in a comeback win. The Utah Jazz came back all the way down, and as they would say, as the haters would say, Doc Rivers is in playoff mode. But they allowed so many looks in the paint, but most of them being because of pick and rolls. They ran zone a couple of times, which seemed to be working for them, but overall their defense has been really weak. The other problem with in the lineup might be how the players are utilized on the offensive side of the ball and their spacing. Sometimes Giannis would be posted up or standing on the weak side wing, which is quite literally the worst spot for him to be standing on the court because he can't shoot. Now, he can shoot. Like, I'm not trying to discredit his shooting abilities or any of his abilities on the offensive end. I think he definitely can shoot, but from out there, he cannot shoot to the point where like any defender is going to be scared of him from all the way out there. So when he is out there and somebody else, like let's say Dame, has the ball, that gives Damian Lillard a lot less room to operate since Giannis's man is going to constantly keep hedging and going to constantly just ignore him since Giannis is out on the three-point line. So it's ridiculous help, and it shrinks the floor. And that's something that you can't allow when you have Damian Lillard on the team. They also have the tendency to overcrowd the weak side baseline. This just makes it a lot easier for one defender to guard two, which allows the defense to send double teams and whatnot, all those kinds of things. I personally think it should be Giannis, running the pick and roll with him instead of Brook Lopez, and Brook Lopez goes ahead and spots up. They usually run a pick and roll with Brook Lopez being the center, which I just don't agree with. I feel like he should be the spot up in that situation just to space the floor, and because of how good Giannis is at actually finishing at the rim. Even with all of this and all of these issues that I mentioned, the open looks that they were giving up, the offensive struggles, the indecisiveness on the team, they're still top 2 in the Eastern Conference. So why exactly was he fired? Because if you're winning, then there's absolutely no need for the organization to fire you, especially if it means that they're going to take in Doc Rivers. And look at what Doc Rivers is doing right now. He's 1-4 as the Bucks head coach, and he just recently lost to the Utah Jazz, who, might I remind you, the Utah Jazz lost to the Philadelphia 76ers without Embiid. So losing to the Utah Jazz is a big problem for the Bucks, and it really shows like just how bad Doc Rivers is how incompetent Doc Rivers is as a coach. I'm going to use that word because the adjustments he makes zero. He made 0 adjustments in that fourth quarter, which led to that comeback, and it is infuriating to watch. Now, it might be a mix of bad luck, but it can't be bad luck all the time because it happens all the time with Doc Rivers. So, anyways, back to why Adrian Griffin was fired. So, there was speculation around the media that he lost his job because he was talking bad about Giannis's brother, Thanasis. Now, forgive me if I missaid that name or misspoke that name. It's very difficult to pronounce both of their names. Now, any normal man who wants his job doesn't talk trash to Giannis's brother. No matter how bad or how inconsistent he is at the game, you don't talk about Giannis's brothers. You don't do that. And he messed himself up, in my personal opinion, with this alleged insult to Thanasis. The reports don't explicitly say what he said, just that he wasn't speaking very highly of him. He messed himself up. If it's the truth, then why did it lead to him losing his job? Like, if his statements are true, why did it lead to him losing his job, you might ask? Giannis is probably one of the nicest, the kindest souls in the NBA. Whatever he does, he doesn't do it for himself. He does it for his family. That's always in his mind, his family. And the money he and his brother makes are most likely going back to the family in some amount. So Giannis making sure that his brothers are making money is like he is indirectly giving more money to his family. So that's exactly what brothers do. They look out for each other. And Giannis was just looking out for his brother, who was getting criticized by his very own head coach. So Thanasis is one of the fan favorites for the Bucks. He might not deliver much for the team in terms of production, but he does go out there. He plays with a lot of heart. He's one of the worst players to have, however, in my personal opinion. Thanasis has the same dynamic as LeBron James Jr. So in college, so far, Bronny James has not been performing that well, but he's expected to be drafted number 1 because LeBron really wants to play for his son. So you get Bronny, you get LeBron James. So this is the exact same dynamic that Giannis has with his brother now. So with that in mind, the dumbest thing you could do in that situation is insult Giannis's brother. That is the biggest no-no in every single handbook. Insulting Giannis or his brother, that wasn't in the manual last time I checked. So Giannis, however, he denied, because he's so nice, he denied any type of accusations of this nature, saying that he loved the guy, quote unquote. But based on the vibes that the bench was giving off, the bench was literally dancing after he got fired. So based off of that and all the other and the happiness that's been surrounding the locker room now, I don't think they loved the guy. Me personally, I don't think they particularly loved the guy. Now, some people might be asking, why did Doc Rivers get this position if he doesn't deserve it? Because like I mentioned earlier, he's 1-3 or 1-4 in the standings he's only won 1 game as the Bucks head coach. So And in the most recent game that he lost in a comeback win from the Utah Jazz. So why was he even selected? Why was this just given to him? So the reason why this was given to him was because the Eastern All-Stars head coach was the Boston Celtics head coach. He was the head coach for the Eastern All-Stars lineup last year. So because of this, Boston's head coach has become ineligible for the spot. And I think that's a relatively dumb rule. Like, so what if you've had a winning record last season? That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to participate or coach the Eastern All-Stars. I understand that they want to give other coaches the incentives, but if the other coaches aren't doing it like the Celtics coaches, then it's just giving it for someone for the sake of giving the award to someone. And what about giving it to the coach for the Knicks, or the coach for the Cavs, or the coach for the Sixers? If it's going to be handed out based on team success, then at least be consistent with it, because as I mentioned earlier, Doc has only won one game with this team. So why not give it to any of these other coaches who I feel definitely deserve it for how they've turned their franchises around? Doc hasn't had any success with this team yet. Since Doc doesn't even feel like he deserves the role, he decides that he's going to give his ring and his incentives to Adrian Griffin, since he legitimately does deserve that award, which is always such a kind gesture, and it's definitely the right move to do. The former coach deserves it for the job he did. And as for the West, we have no idea what coach has been. No coach has been chosen yet. I guess since all the teams in the West are relatively close with each other, they're having a difficult time choosing which head coach should be the coach for the Western Conference. But I personally think it should be Tyronn Lue. We'll find out who they go with, but I personally think Tyronn Lue should be the one to be the head coach for the Western Conference. He coached LeBron, who is the captain of the All-Star team, and he's also coached several different All-Star teams. So even though a lot of All-Star games are just for players to have fun and do cool dunks and shoot deep threes, obviously the coach matters in this type of sense. So with that, we are out of time for the second segment. I talked a lot about LeBron in both of these segments, so we're going to pivot and talk about his most notorious rival, Stephen Curry, and what the Golden State Warriors should expect in the future and what they should do moving on. Right after this short break, I will be right back.